like to introduce Janina. We're just going to jump straight in. So Janina from Ngāi Tahu and Ngā Puhi is the kaiarahi of Mātauraka Mahanui. And so for those who aren't aware, the Mātauraka Mahanui are an advisory board to the Ministry of Education, and they have a mandate to represent Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu to provide advice and guidance to kind of education-related things, Ministry of Education, in particular advice and guidance through the post-earthquake renewal of education across Waitaha, the Canterbury region. So Janina in particular, Janina is kaiarahi there, and hugely important role in ensuring that the Te Ao Māori voice is heard in local education kind of growth and movement. So Janina, thank you very much.
Oh, kia ora tātou. E ngā kai whakahaere o te hui nei, tēnā koutou. Ki ngā whānau o te hui, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Huri tēnei no Ngāi Tahu ngō Ngā Puhi. He kaiarahi au ki Mātauraka Mahanui, and kei te kai a te kāraro, ahau, e noho ana i tēnei wā, ko Janina Konia tōku ingoa, no reira, nei rā te mihi mana hau ki a koutou. Kia ora, thanks for the warm welcome and the invitation to speak today. I'm Janina. I'm currently residing and speaking from Te Kai a Te Kāraro, which is the traditional name of South New Brighton in Ōtautahi. And I thought I'd actually start the kōrero today just highlighting the meaning behind the Whakatauaki that you see there. So he mahi kai takata, he mahi kai huaka. So this is the Whakatauaki that's guiding the kōrero for this evening, and the literal translation of that is, it is the work that consumes people as greenstone consumes sandstone. And conceptually, it's like as a task consumes generations, and or anything worthwhile requires considerable effort. This Whakatauaki was coined by Hastings Tipa, and it likens the hard work that our tipuna put into the Ngāi Tahu claim, or te krimi, to the process of shaping pounamu. It is a long process that takes a lot of work, time and sacrifice. And Sir Tipene O'Regan used it in describing how the treaty settlement process, quote, consumed and eroded the people, like the greenstone is devoured by the sandstone. So despite the effort and the time it takes to complete a task, the result is this kind of treasured taonga of pounamu. So I was thinking about this kaupapa of leading authentic partnerships, and I was thinking about the time and effort that actually is required to putting into building and nurturing trusting relationships, and the ongoing and intentional actions and behaviours that leaders demonstrate in order to shape and polish that change that we drive to see. So persevering until we actually get the results that we seek. In other words, good things take time is the spirit of this Whakatauaki. So the trauma caused by the earthquake crisis that we've had here in Ōtautahi has impacted greatly on the well-being of our communities, as we know. However, with this period of change and disruption, we've also seen that we've got opportunities. We've had the opportunity to innovate, to strengthen, to reshape and rebuild by working together. And as you heard from Stephen in the beginning, Mātauraka Mahanui are an advisory group mandated by Te Rūnanga o Ngāi Tahu to work in partnership with the ministry to provide advice and guidance through the renewal of education across Waitaha post-earthquake. While we do that, we're building the education sector's focus on accelerating te reo Māori provision and enhancing the outcomes for Māori learners as Māori. By working together, what we do is we advise on how local Māori stories are acknowledged and woven into the physical spaces and curriculum content for education providers. The earthquakes really, I think, ignited this real opportunity to embed mana whenua voice into the fabric of the city and also into our learning landscapes. And we are supporting and giving effect to that change in the work that we do under Mātauraka Mahanui. Over the last 4 years, we've watched how these opportunities have provided renewed hope, actually, in a number of ways, such as building a real sense of belonging and connectedness to place for everybody, particularly though in leading change that begins to address the inequities we face within education. So I'll just get Chris to show my screen, which is our guiding whakatauaki for the work that we do. It's called Ekia Te Pai Kahukura. So it's our guiding whakatauaki, but it's also the name of our strategy. The literal translation of which is Ekia Te Pai Kahukura is ascend to the heights of excellence. Kahukura is in reflection of the Te Tihi o Kahukura, which is the Port Hills and around the Cashmere Hills of Ōtautahi. But what I've got there for you is the metaphoric representation of that whakatauaki and our strategy and our vision really for what we do. Alongside that image you'll see one of a pepe. That's my daughter, well, our daughter Holly. She's 10 years old now, so that was 10 years ago, and that photo was taken in Seoul, South Korea, which is actually where she was born. And this was our farewell lunch that we had there with our friends and our whānau, who we considered our whānau, just before we made the journey to return back here to Aotearoa. We wanted to bring her back here and raise her around our marae, or my marae. We wanted her to grow up connected to her whakapapa, her culture and her identity. So I see a really clear connection here between the vision of the work that we do with Mātaraka Mahanui and my hopes and aspirations for my daughter. I grew up here in Ōtautahi, came through a mainstream education system, and so for me there wasn't a lot that reflected my Māori whakapapa visually or otherwise really. A lot that told the story of my English lineage, but very little of my Ngāi Tahutanga. Connecting to my culture and my whakapapa really only happened during times that I was visiting my marae or spending time on my marae. So I'm really, for me, inspired by what I've seen over the last number of years, the change in the city, okay, with the embedding of cultural narratives that's now there, and which Holly, my daughter, gets to experience through her growth and her childhood. In a way, this is a foundation of rebuilding our local identity, reclaiming our narrative, our history, our culture, our truths. These narratives that have been told and recorded by our kaumātua in our pūrākau, our oral stories from our tipuna, so that our tamariki, mokopuna, and all of our children in our schools actually get to hear both sides of our story. As an iwi, we are really growing in confidence with knowing our own kōrero, and it's really important for us that we see those kōrero and those stories in our schools for our children to know and understand. If we flick over one more, you'll see the kind of mahi that our facilitators are engaged in. All of what we do here, we do alongside our local papatipu runaka, so nothing's done in isolation. This here you can see the things that we do in our role. The things we don't do is we don't engage in anything around tikanga, because we leave that to our papatipu runaka. It's not our place to discuss that, that's for them to determine and for them to share. So we have a rather interesting and complex way of working and lots of partners that we work with. And so some of those are obviously the Ministry of Education at the governance level. We work with the entity called Grow Waitaha, another one of our partners here in Ōtautahi, helping with the renewal of education across the space. We work with 3 of the 6 papatipu runaka in the space, so 3 of the 6 marae. We know that our 3 papatipu runaka are not all the same, so they have different perspectives, they have different structures of how they work and different processes. And so we as Mātaraka Mahanui have to navigate those spaces. We have to feed back information all the time to each of the people that we're in partnership with via reporting, in written form, emails, having hui, phone calls, and yeah, so there's a lot of partnership work that goes on beneath the surface of the work that we do. Most of the sector, so alongside working in partnership with these entities, we're also obviously growing our partnership with the sector. So our schools, our ECEs, our kahui ako, and our teachers and our leaders. Most of the sector have welcomed our leadership in this space, and some have needed a little more guidance along the way. This has meant that our team, our small team of 5, spend a lot of time collaborating, debriefing, clarifying, and identifying strategies we can employ to support at all stages of the continuum. it's been a real journey for me personally, leading this mahi as I have shifted and grown along the way as well. The approach I aim to take in working with our schools and communities is to attempt to meet people where they're at, meeting people where they're at and then guiding them on the journey forward from there. What that looks like obviously varies depending on the context, the people and the need. In taking a values and strengths based approach to working in partnership, we're able to support schools in really organic ways. So one of the things I mean about that is we're not defined by time, or we're not defined by set ways of outworking our vision. The ministry have entrusted us to have autonomy over the way we choose to deliver that. So we work in partnership with kura or kahui to establish those pathways together. And we look specifically, for us, it's really important to identify what's working well, how we know it's working well, and then collectively find ways we can build on that. What are the opportunities to grow success is what we're looking for. I thought I'd just mention too, I realise that a lot of those joining us today are from all around Aotearoa, so mihi atu kia koutou, and to those in Tamaki Makaurau, we're thinking of you in this space as well and what's happening up there. If you are not located here in Waitaha and don't have access to the support of Mātaraka Mahanui, because we only act in this space, that's the only mandate we have, is here in Waitaha. I just want to say that the focus, or one of the key messages here, is really just on engaging with your local mana whenua and exploring the kinds of relationships and partnerships that might be possible in that space. Kia ora.
Back to Janina, we're now going to unpack some specific experiences of some journeys, some haringa that Janina's been involved with or has seen that she can share some concrete examples with us. So thank you, Janina. Ka tuku ki a koe.
I just let's start by saying that when we start partnerships, they don't tend to start at authentic, obviously, and equitable. And it's something that we have to intentionally work towards. Just as the Whakatauaki, he mahi kai takata, he mahi kai huaka suggests, it's about the perseverance and a genuine commitment to measured long-term change and long-term relationships, really. What could this look like? Leaders prioritising strategies to support the development of relationships, identifying how the systems and structures within their kura or even within their kahui ako can create better opportunities for communication and relationship building. I think we are shaping and refining of the relationships happen continuously in case there is a need, not because there is a need. So the before and between moments of crisis opportunity, we were just talking in our breakout room about this, whether the engagement with us at times is authentic, what is the reason behind it. Sometimes it can be, to be honest with you, because there is a need, there's a crisis, so now we need to contact mana whenua and get support. So I guess in order to be authentic, what we're seeing now is a real shift in leaders thinking that actually we need to be building these relationships, we want to build these relationships before that happens. After that, keep it going and everything else as it goes forward. And we also talked about how hard it is to measure the benefits of doing that. But what I think I'm seeing across our communities here, speak for myself, is a real shift throughout this past 3 or 4 year journey that I've been on with Mātaraka Mahanui, and a real focus on finding ways to be effective, finding appropriate ways to engage with mana whenua. And actually a real interest in understanding who mana whenua are and what this place is about. So understanding that they need to engage early, that they need to build a relationship and they need to demonstrate a commitment in what they're doing in the kura for the benefit of their Māori learners and local hapu before putting out their hand and asking for something or requesting support. So there's there's definitely been some movements there. So we're moving away from, ooh, we have this, you know, oh, we've got this Māori event, we've got to open our school, we better pick up the phone and call mana whenua, request and ask them for support. And then, you know, the response to which on the other end might be something like, do I know you? So in our role, the message that we have for our schools and who we're working with is that they need to engage with the marae first, because that's where the relationships have to start. And then they engage with us at Mātaraka Mahanui. So, and we're always talking with our papatipu as well about that. So here in Waitaha, our education communities have actually offered education workshops for communities, and that's the one easy way that schools can start that engagement, and that's how we direct them. More kura now are also here looking at ways to reciprocate the partnership by offering to bring, you know, for example, offering to bring learners over to tidy up the waterways, offering to come and help tidy up the grounds and the marae, or offering to do baking for the kaumātua, offering that, you know, they can come and do performances if we have an event and they would like and we would like their support. Sending out pānui and newsletters to share what's happening within their kura, particularly if it's related to the aspirations of our whānau and our hapu and iwi. And also we've got leaders now more readily engaging in all opportunities that they can to actually connect. So we've got a number of them who are, you know, like we say, kānohi kitia, the seen face. We actually know them by name. So some of our papatipu have tumuaki who will come along and they'll actually know who they are by name because they are regularly engaging or making an effort. We're finding that leaders are more often than not now honouring our place by acknowledging rather than taking and owning or having this expectation. And we have tumuaki ensuring and insisting that we're at the table, that we're invited to hui. So we've gone through this journey of in the beginning where we feel like we're trying to get our foot in the door and justify why we need to be there, to our leaders now actually insisting that we are pulling up a chair. So rather than being fearful of loss of current traditions and culture, which was some of the things that were happening in the beginning, they've now had this attitude that we have nothing to lose and everything to gain by including mana whenua voice, by embedding mātauranga Māori cultural narrative into all elements of school life. These are leaders who have a sense of mission and who inspire others to their vision. They bring people together, they are connectors, they're collaborators, they share leadership, they value our ideas and perspective, they're open to learning and understanding self in order to understand others. Just a few things I wrote about them. So some of the snippets that I'm seeing also, our cultural narrative has become normalised in this place amongst our communities. It's an everyday language. We've got leaders who not only listen to what we have to say and have us at the table, they're actually putting actions in place to live out some of the advice and guidance that we're providing. We've got leaders who can now come to forums and share with other leaders, comfortably share with them their journey around localising their curriculum and what that looks like, but it's more about the process that they've been through, the time they've taken with care, and the engagement and partnerships that have allowed that to unfold successfully. So we actually have some kōrero as evidence of success around working in this way, which is really awesome. School visions, values are now becoming reflective of cultural narrative, and cultural narrative is actually forming the foundation of curriculum design and thinking, and it's linking to the local sites of cultural significance. Place-based learning included in that, so actually going to those places with their learners. And mana whenua have of course been key in that process, throughout that process, not just at one place or another. Kānohi ki te kānohi, so leaders are placing value in this as a more effective approach to working with us, so face-to-face, and an open door policy, so engaging on our own terms and when and how we like. And I think as a parent, for me, my kids are in a Māori meeting provision within a mainstream kura, but there are no barriers for me to going into that school and talking with our kaiako whenever I feel I need to. And there's no barriers there for me going in and spending time in the classroom with my kids and actually being part of that ako process. So this kind of thing where tumuaki have that approach as well with us is working in some spaces. it's really aligned to the cultural values that we uphold as Māori. And I recently had this conversation with a local tūmawaki who responded with, as long as it doesn't interfere with the learning. And then we actually paused. So this is someone I have a relationship with. We paused and she stood there and I could see her mind thinking, and then she turned around and she said, unless that's just what my Western world view is thinking. And then we moved forward. And I think it's those moments, and I smiled, and it's those moments of shift. It's those moments of real honesty and vulnerability in leaders that really cement those relationships and create change, I feel, for me. So we've got a lot of openings of buildings and things happening here, obviously, and that sits with our Papa Tipu Runaka, and they support the tikanga around that. But I was speaking to one of our Education Committee leads from one of our Papa Tipu who went to one of these openings of these new kura. And one of the things she said to me is, wow, I went to such and such a kura for the opening, and all of the tūmawaki from the kahui ako came in support, and all of them stood up and sang the waiata tautoko. She said, I couldn't believe it. It was so emotional. I was almost in tears. 3 years ago, they never would have done that, nor would they have been able to do that. So real shifts in there, and Papa Tipu acknowledging that. And our recent Te Ope Hautu Hui that we had, group of leaders we bring together once a term, and we did a quick mihi around the room so we know who's there, where you're from, what school you work at, one other thing about yourself. And as they stood up, we were just, there's about 40 or so people in the room, I te reo Māori, I te reo Māori, I te reo Māori, like just everybody standing up, introducing themselves in te reo. And me and my colleague, who's the kaiako of reo for us and our team, just looked at each other. We were like, what's just happened? And so the shift from when we first started that in 2017 to now is really inspiring, actually. Kahui have been inviting us into their lead hui, and so we attend some of those meetings if we so want. They share their documentation. They have this open and transparent process where they just share us into what's happening in the agenda. If we want to come along, if we can't, that's fine. Changing of names and kura. So a big part of what we do is naming buildings, naming schools, naming buildings. So Papa Tipu will gift a te reo Māori name should the school want one. The question is, do you have a relationship with your local Papa Tipu first before they're going to go about gifting you a name? So we have to kind of work around those things as well. But what I'm noticing is schools wanting to put the te reo Māori name first, schools rebranding according to that te reo Māori name, and even though they may face some interesting conversations with some aspects of their communities, they are brave enough and courageous enough just to continue on through that journey, because they know what they're doing is coming from a place of aroha, place of pono tika. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of sharing strengths and honest conversations across kahui that we work with. So we get them all together as leaders of each kahui, and we ask them to have a look at what they think they're doing currently to lead and manage for Māori learner success. What does that look like? What do they think is happening? Then we ask them to go back into their kura and actually look at what actually is happening, who says that's happening, and what does that look like? And then they come back to us together, all the schools together, and they discuss those things that they've found. And what we're looking for is the key strengths from each of those schools in that kahui, and then we're asking them to share those strengths in order to collectively build the strength of the whole kahui. So those things are happening as well. I mean, this is just some of the things that we're seeing. It's been a real journey. It's been a hard slog at times, but these are the outcomes of success that we're getting to now share with people. This is not to say that we've reached the pounamu taonga stage. However, the shaping is underway. We've been sanding out some of the nicks and some of the blemishes, and we're heading towards that polishing point. So I'm just going to finish off with a few closing words now, and I've got some bullet points on the slide which kind of talk to this. But question is, what is required for a partnership to be authentic in its approach? I think we all have some really great ideas about that pārtai, but through my journey and my lens, I see that through it takes honesty, trust, transparency, respect for what each partner brings to the relationship, shared goals and aspirations as well as values. There's mutual benefits to each partner, and we participate equally in the partnership with a fair distribution of leadership, power, resources and recognition. And as we walk alongside the leaders of our education communities here in Waitaha, supporting and empowering them, we're seeing a genuine commitment by some to owning their part in this, growing their knowledge and awareness of the power dynamics of the inequities, looking for them, calling them out, and acting with intention to address them. So they're the leaders who are prioritising the relationships, the partnerships, braving the challenges, having those hard conversations and continuing to be active despite them. Taking up the challenge of feeding their own cultural competency is key, and I just thought I would join the conversation. So this is just a snippet of what's in that paperwork that the ministry put out to the messages that some of our communities shared. And I think that we're seeing this across Waitaha. We're seeing our leaders actually normalising te reo, normalising tikanga, really engaging in relationships and their own cultural competency. So that's all from me. Kia ora.